this side feels more complete. It feels more balanced in general. So maybe I'll go with this one. I'll go with this one, and I will edit out those people. So when I'm starting off, I usually start off with my exposure, and then I work on the color after that, like the base exposure. So if you look at my histogram up here, everything is within range. We're not clipping any blacks and we're not clipping any whites. So we have a perfect exposure. How many seconds is this? This is 25-second exposure. If we zoom in, everything is nice and sharp because I was on a tripod. So first thing I'll do actually is I'll enable the profile corrections because it was 24mm, so you get this vignetting all around the sides, and I want to control the vignetting myself. So I'll turn that on, and we'll turn on Chromatic Aberration as well. Remove Chromatic Aberration, I should say. You mightn't be able to see it. Maybe out here, if you look at this section here, you might be able to see it if I turn on Chromatic Aberration. Yeah, I can see it anyway. Don't know if you can see it, but it's removing the little purplish red fringing and green fringing as well. So yeah, so that's done. So usually what I do, I'll just try to bring as much detail as I can out of the shadows. Now everything's pretty well exposed in general. However, you can see down here, this is quite dark. So if you bring up the shadows a little, just opening it up just a little bit. I don't want to go too far because I'm introducing noise everywhere. So I'll do it maybe about here. And that looks pretty good to me. Now all this section up here is way too bright. So I'm going to be, I am going to be, what am I doing? I am going to be darkening all this down in general because I want to go for a moody kind of look. So yeah, to go for a moody look and enhance maybe like the edges around here. The grass is quite nice around here. The texture of the grass is lovely. The color is nice. And I'll be using dodging and burning, color dodging and burning, to enhance the contrast everywhere. Okay, so it's quite flat looking now, a bit too bright, so I might just darken the whole image down altogether because it was actually darker than this when we were there. Or maybe I'll leave it. Yeah, maybe I'll leave it up and we can sort it out in Photoshop. What I do here, I actually like to, well done, thanks. I actually like to do my sharpening in Photoshop, so I will remove, so Lightroom automatically applies like 40 points of sharpening. However, I prefer to do my editing first, like all my contrast and color adjustments, and then apply the sharpening afterwards, because I will be applying Orton effects and stuff like that, so that kind of messes up with everything. Makes stuff, the Orton effect is what makes everything give that glowy kind of ethereal, magical fantasy look. I'm not going to go overboard. I try not to go overboard on my stuff, but yeah, look, the composition's okay. It's fine. It was a bit of a rushed shoot because, as I said, I was meeting someone, so we'll just go ahead and start editing this in Photoshop. So yeah, so here we are. Just increase my screen. So I use non-destructive editing. So Control J, and now what I'll do to start with, I'm going to apply a a general orton effect all over the image and then work in layers above, adding contrast onto the orton effect, so it makes it a bit more realistic looking. Nice. Just my buddy passed his exams. Sweet. Okay, so go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. This for a lot of people, this is a matter of taste. You can go quite high with it because of course you can control the opacity on the layer, so I usually go to about 40 points. There we go. This is not what we're going to use, so we'll come down to about 15, and we'll zoom in a bit. So as you can see, like, since I removed the sharpening from Lightroom, it's still quite fuzzy looking, and then of course I've got the Gaussian blur over that at an opacity of 15%. So if you turn it on and off, you can see the effect it's having there. So it's having quite a drastic effect on the texture. So what we want to do is remove it from most of the textured parts, especially the parts in the shadows, and that is because the orton effect is meant to accentuate light. So we really shouldn't be seeing as much of the orton effect in the shadows. A lot of people tend to do this. It's kind of a sign that some people tend to overdo their editing by when you see that the orton effect is applied throughout the whole image, and it just makes it look it just makes it look kind of crap, really, to be honest. Some people like it. It's just not my cup of tea. So how do we get rid of it from the shadows? We could just apply a mask and get a brush. Set your brush to black, and then so we have our mask selected. Brush, go to opacity about 20%, and then you could just remove it from the shadows like this, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. If we check our mask, then you can see where it's being selected there, where I'm removing the effect from. It's fine, but it's not selective enough. There's one really good tool that I use, which is much more accurate and much quicker. And that is, well, I have it in an action panel. I use Tony Kuiper's action panel, TK Actions. And what this does is it automatically selects a luminosity layer. So it prepares a luminosity mask. So like I was saying, I only want the orton effect in the lighter areas where the light is touching the actual ground. Like I said, you shouldn't see that glowing effect within the shadowy areas. So we'll say darks 2, and you can see where it's selecting already. And if you want to get a proper visual representation of that, you just click view. So everything that's pink is where the mask will be applied, and everything that's white is where the mask will be revealed. So the orton effect you'll still see in the whiter areas, but you won't see as much of it in the pink areas. This is pretty good. It might be a bit too much because I'll be adding contrast in again afterwards. So what I'll do is here we go. Yeah, this is a bit better. So view it, and we'll apply that layer. Now we'll zoom in and you can have a look. So you're still getting a bit of the orton effect within the shadows. You mightn't be able to see it on stream there, but still getting a bit of the effect. Who's that? Nice. Okay. So now that we have our orton effect Nice little bit of orton effect all over. Now you don't need the action panels for luminosity masks. You can create them yourselves. I'm not going to do it at the moment because I just have my action panels and that's how I do. If someone wants to see me do the orton effect at some stage, how to create the luminosity masks manually, you can ask me and I can do a video on that all on its own. But just for the purposes of this video, we're just going to go through this image and just edit. So that's done. So now I'm going to start applying just a bit of contrast just to bring back some of the detail that was lost within when we applied that orton effect. So I'll just click view here and see where this mask is being applied. Midtones. So you can see a lot, it's being applied a lot in the shadows. Don't want it applied in the highlights there, but we'll just see how that goes. Nope. And I'll use a curves adjustment layer. And you can see with the mask here, that's what the mask looks like. So when I'm adjusting the curves layer, the black parts won't be affected as much as the white parts. This mightn't be the best, but anyway, we'll just this isn't a huge part of it. I'll be adding more contrast at the end as well. So at the moment the color is actually, I should have done the color at the start in Lightroom, but it doesn't matter, I can do it here. So what I'll do is I'll create a stamped visible layer. So it's shortcut for that is Control Shift Alt E, known as the people call it the claw. But and then I will turn this into a smart filter. We'll bring up a camera raw filter. Okay, so to me this is a bit it's kind of green. This green down here is cool, I like that, but in the shadows here it's a bit kind of greenish looking. I don't mind the cool tone. The cool tone kind of suits the atmosphere, what I'm going for, because I want the image to be a bit moodier, a bit darker. But I want to get rid of this green, this kind of greenish tone. I don't know, can you see it on the rocks there? So I just add in a bit of magenta. I want to keep the bluish tone. So how I usually work with colors in this section is I put the saturation all the way over to the right so that I can see an exaggerated effect of what this slider is doing. So red primary slider. So taking to the right, you're taking away the red from the highlights, so it's turning it kind of blue. Bring it to the left, you're adding more green. It looks kind of funky to the left. So just bring it a few points. And anything with color I usually do very lightly because it's so easy to overdo it. Again, green primary, bring it to the right, bring the saturation all the way up, and then change the hue like that. So yeah, I like it. I like taking the hue to the left a bit. It enhances the yellow within the green tones down here, and bringing a bit more blues into the highlights then as well. So I kind of like that. So again, leave the saturation down a bit, and same with blue. So this is the one where people tend to go a bit overboard with. You'll see a lot of people with their orange and teal effect, especially with split toning, and this is another way to do it here. So yeah, so I do not like when people do this. I think a lot of photographers don't like it when people do that because it was cool like 10 years ago, and there's some people still doing it. And look, if you're just messing around with software and you're just getting into editing, and like that's fine. Like you're trying to come up with a style that suits that suits yourself, and you're trying to put a stamp, your own stamp on something, which is fine. And you'll go through that phase. I went through that phase. But yeah, it's a bit overkill. I don't like it. This then just looks wacky. So I tend to, like, if anything, I'll bring it down a couple of points, but I'll leave the saturation. Fine. So then that's kind of when I've everything dialed in a little bit and my colors. So I'll go back up to my basic panel, and I'll bring the saturation up and to get a good view of where I'm going with this. So it all looks quite blue, which isn't too bad because I'm going for a dark blue image. Like evening time, lack of sunlight, tones are going to be blue. That's the natural. Like if I started warming the tones up here, that's not what it was like on the day. Okay, it doesn't have to be like what it was like on the day, but I want something a bit darker. I want something a bit moodier, because if you look at the sky, we'll bring down the exposure. That sky, that's a moody, dark sky. That's what I want the image to look like. So warming everything up and making it look like a lovely, happy sunshine, it just looks bleh. It looks kind of dirty. A bit dirty, as they'd say in Dublin. But yeah, maybe it's a little bit cool. Bring it up a point, and we'll just come down to the, like, this is all to taste. This isn't the right way to do things. This is just how I do things. Color mixer, go to saturation in the blues. We'll bring it down just a smidge, and the yellows then, I might bring it's not too bad usually. Usually the yellows will affect the grass a bit more, but because I messed around with the colors, it's probably not affecting it. But the green, yeah, we'll take down the green a wee bit. And then that's the aqua inside the water there. We'll enhance it just a small bit, because I like that. Okay, I'm happy with that. So because this is a smart filter, I can just double click it and I can come back in. You see, it's not destructive editing. It is non-destructive editing. If I was to put that smart filter on a normal layer, not a smart object, then I wouldn't be able to go back and re-edit all that calibration. See, the calibration numbers are still the same. I wouldn't be able to go back and do that. So that's why I put it on a smart filter. Okay, now at this point, so I kind of have my color dialed in. I have my Orton effect. I might do more Orton effect in the background there in a minute. But I think now is time for the fun but kind of tedious part of painting in my shadows and my highlights. So this is basically selectively adding contrast. So you Alt click New Layer, go to Soft Light, fill with 50% gray, and there we go. And then I will just duplicate this layer, and we'll call this one Darks. We'll call this one Lights. So I might create two darks actually, just because I'll do a general vignette all the way around, and then with my second darks layer, I'll use that for painting in the more detailed parts. So black conceals, light reveals. So all we're doing, because we've created this layer, this soft light layer, 50% gray layer, when I paint with black or white, I'm actually lightening or darkening the image, but it's on a separate layer again, so it's non-destructive. I'm not actually painting on the image. What do I mean by painting? Let me show you. So I want to create a vignette, so I need to change my brush to black, make it nice and big and soft as well, so hardness set to 0, and I'll bring my opacity down. I normally do this with a brush, but I'm not going to take out my brush now because it's just going to be a bit awkward. I normally do it with not a brush, but a graphics tablet, graphics pad. But I'll just use my mouse just for the purposes of this. So I want to create a big vignette. So I want a nice gradient, nice large gradient all the way through, all the way around. So it's no good doing this with your small brush. It'll look, it won't look very tidy. So it has to be, and it needs to be nice and subtle to draw the eye, kind of draw the eye in towards here and then out up into where this island is out here, the Great Blasket Island. I've been sat at my computer all day. This is way too bright up here. I don't like what's going on. What do I do about this now? Let's go into my smart filters just a second. Is there a better way to do this? Come on. Oh, here we go. Camera raw filter, I should say. So I only want to affect this part of the image. So what I will do is I will grab, where are my tools? I'll grab a graduated filter. I'll come down here. So graduated filter is telling me where the effect is going to be applied. So from here to here, the effect will be 100%, but from here to here, it will fade away. And then from here, there will be no effect applied. So just to give you an example, drop the exposure. From here to here, all the way along, the effect is, this effect of dropping the exposure has been applied 100%, and then it gradually fades out. Gradually fades out. So I want, like, this whole area is way too bright here for me, so. But let's see, try to only affect the highlights. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. There we go. That's it. That's it. And now so you can see using the highlights, it's really only affecting the highlights here. But if I wanted to affect an even narrower range of highlights, Jesus, lads, I can't even talk. Come down to our range mask down here, and we'll select luminance, and then we'll take the luminance. We're removing the effect from the darker areas. See what's happening? Move up. And I'll just do it from the other side so you can see what's happening. And you see it's removing it from the brighter areas. But I only want the lighter areas to be affected. Like, I don't want this area really here to be affected. So let's take the luminance slider up. And I don't want this to be affected either. So here we go now. We'll visualize the luminance layer. So there you go. It's only being affected in these areas. So I think I'll drop the highlights just a little bit more. And drop the exposure just a little bit more. Let's see now. Turn off the visualization. Okay, it's not too bad. So what if I don't know if you notice this now in this, but the sky is darker than our foreground. This is a very common mistake that landscape photographers make when they start out and when they're editing photos, and it looks weird. Please stop doing it. When have you ever looked at the sky and seen it? That's my cat. Can you hear the cat? No. When have you ever looked at the sky and noticed that it's darker than the ground? Never. It doesn't happen. It looks weird. So it looks weird in the photo here. But it happens in landscape photography all the time. You see it on Instagram all the time. So that's what I've done here, but I'm going to fix that in a minute. I've exaggerated it here, but I see I'm going to continue darkening the foreground. So say okay. So that's a bit better. I'm getting the mood. I'm getting there with the mood. The mood is, this is kind of what it was like while I was there with Mark Duffy. So here we go. So what I need to do, I need to darken this a bit more. And if you can see, there's a bit of blue in the shadows here, which there's no, you can see the blue here, but it's not here. So I want to fix that as well. But for the moment, for the meantime, we're just gonna continue to darken it the way I need to. Okay. Just a load of people are after joining me in chat now for some reason. Hi guys. Okay, I'm just gonna come back here. Yeah. There we go. So you can still see this section here is still too bright. This section here is still too bright. We got our big dark sky, and then the foreground down here is all bright. This is weird. This is not how a photo should look, and this is a common thing you'd see on Instagram, especially when people are editing photos, especially when people use the graduated filters while they're shooting. The sky is like completely dark, and then you've got this lovely perfectly lit foreground. It doesn't make any sense. But I will fix that. So I'm going to go back into my camera raw filter here and change my graduated filter, because this is too dark up at the top. So graduated filter, here we go. We'll select the filter, and then I'll just brighten it up just a tad bit more, just a tiny bit. I still want to keep the mood. I can drop the whole exposure of the image maybe later. There, bit more realistic. Okay, so that's my overall vignette done. This is just a kind of a general vignette to try to draw the eye into the pool here and then out towards the islands out here. So now I'm just going to go in with my my detailed darks and accentuate all the darker areas. So that's why I keep them on separate panels. So when I come back later, I'll think maybe I went too far with it, so I'll drop the opacity a wee bit. And then I can do it with the detail slider, my detail contour adjustments separately from the overall vignette. Just tidies everything up and makes sure I don't... so yeah, so into my details, so I'll drop... Normally I do this with a graphics tablet. I just couldn't be bothered taking it out right now, so I'll just use my mouse and dropping the opacity to 4. So we're going to do like I'm going to use the color of the ground, so I'll alt click to sample the color. So it's kind of greenish anyway, and use that to enhance the shadow areas. But remember to resample. Let's say I'm going back into the wall section here, but I've still got the green selected. So if I'm darkening the wall, resample. You can see the color. It's a blue hue. So if you don't remember to resample, you'll just start painting green on the ground, and that just looks, it won't look weird at the beginning, but once you zoom back out and you've painted everything feckin' green, it looks stupid. So so I'm going to come back here with color adjustments again because you can see this is all green here, and I don't particularly like it. So I'm just going to come back in later and just desaturate it. Not completely, because that'll just look weird. But yeah, you'll see what I do in a minute. I'm going to move on to the lights section now. So I'm like what I was doing with the shadow section. I just want to use I'm going to use the brush and sample an area of green in the grass and make it a bit brighter, and then paint in the brighter green. Okay, so I kind of like the mood here. Again, I don't like the greenish tones in the rock, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a saturation layer. Yellows, greens. So it's more like aqua tones that I don't like. But I will drop the saturation of the greens as well, just a little bit, because I want that kind of moody look, so I don't want everything to look too saturated. Cyan. So there we go. There's a bit of cyan in the rocks, if you can see it around here. I want to leave the cyan in the water because that is cool. So I'll knock the cyan out of the rocks, and I'll also knock the blues out of the rocks. So that's a bit better looking. And I'll invert the layer because I want the blue in the water, obviously. And what am I doing? What am I doing? Cancel. Okay. Bring my opacity up. And just knock it in. Thanks, Michelle. Much appreciated. Shot is less. A terabyte of text. Holy shit, man. I don't know if I can handle that kind of stuff. I think my brain is too mushy to handle. Yeah, I'm already realizing that, Mike. This photo has already gone to places that I didn't imagine it going to. I wouldn't normally bring it to these types of places, but look, I'm here now. I might as well get it done. So take out that blue. Blue from the rock. I'll tell you what happens when I take it out of the... Yeah, there's a small bit of blue in the shadows, of course, of the greens here as well. And I might take it out of that. And definitely here. There we go. That's a lot better looking. That looks a bit more natural now. Oh. Blues. Ah, there we go. I turned down the lightness. That's not what I meant to do. Hold on. There we go. That's how distracting it is. So you can see the amount of blue that was in the bluey greeny that was in the shadows there is, it just looks kind of unnatural. So I'm going to take it away from here as well. There we go. So what I want to do here is probably add, I want to add more Orton effect out here because I want to enhance because that's where actually the sun was setting, in this area here. So I want to maybe just add a bit more of an Orton effect. So what will I do? I'll put it here. I'll put it on a smart filter here. Okay. No, I can't do that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to create a stamped visible layer. And there's probably a better way to do this, a less awkward way to do this. This is just what I'm going to do for while I'm talking to you guys. So what do I do in here? So I want to take away the Orton effect from my foreground here and just apply it to here. So I'm just going to put on a black mask and brush in the effect out here. So you can probably just about see this effect here. It's not strong. Yeah, just maybe a bit up here and a bit down. Yeah, so again, this light here, let's see if I can brighten it up just a little bit more, because I want to get that kind of glowy effect. Put a white layer just on a separate layer. What did I do there? Okay, separate layer, and nope, wrong, on white. So I'm going to, hold on, I'll go back again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush in the brightness and then reduce the opacity. It's too much. I'm going a bit too much here. This, when you're making a gradient like this, it has to be really subtle. I don't know why it's so bright out this area. It's really bugging me, and that's kind of purple as well. I might get rid of that purple. Let's reduce the opacity. And I'm going to selectively, so Alt click, new layer, soft light, fill 50% gray. So I just want to darken a bit more areas, a few more areas a bit more. This rock here is a bit too bright, all of it. So yeah, this area up here is a bit purplish, and it's a bit distracting, so I'm going to I'm going to reduce the magentas just a wee bit. I'm going to get rid of these folks down here. In a way, for a lot of people at least. So there we go, there's this. Boop, boop, gone. I'd usually add some contrast adjustments as well before I finish. I should have done this at the start, but I'm doing it now, whatever. So I'll just target the darkest darks with a curves layer and just lift them. Just zoom in here and just lift them just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. I'll put, say 4. It's much more like meditative approach, much nicer. Right, so here we go. Adding back in a load of contrast, like general contrast I don't want to go too far. My screen is weird as well. It's it suffers. It's like serious lack of contrast in my screen. It's an ISO monitor, like it's a decent monitor. It's like relatively expensive, but on virtually every other screen my photos look more contrasted. So I'm very careful when I'm adding contrast at the end. I'll usually export a JPEG to Google Drive and then download it on my phone just to have a look, double check it before I post anything. It's super annoying actually. But I'm also going to selectively brighten a few areas again with a curves layer. Yeah. And finally, maybe that's a bit too blue. It's a bit too saturated blue up there, so I'm just going to, again, because my screen isn't as contrasted, I can tell already that that blue is probably looking way more blue on your screens. I'm just going to take out, excuse me, knock out some of the blue up here. It's probably a bit too saturated, so I hope I'm not going too far now. Okay. Alright, so now I just add some sharpening. I have an action done for my sharpening, so just a high pass. I would go through the action now, but I'm sure most of you guys know anyway. So before I imported, I imported from Lightroom. So you know the way Lightroom adds like 40 points of sharpening. I usually take away that sharpening from Lightroom before I open it up in Photoshop, so I can just kind of start from the ground up. Oops, I'm going to take, actually I forgot to, bye high pass, add the high pass. So yeah, pretty happy with that. Still a bit too bright up here. Don't know what's going on. I might add a bit of a graduated filter in just in Lightroom, see what happens. And I usually actually I control save this, and I always look like the image always looks different in Lightroom, to me anyway, at least. So I usually add a bit more contrast in Lightroom, then fine tune it. So that was the original image. Yeah, so relatively happy with it. Not bad. It's a pity this island out here is called the Sleeping Giant, because there's the head there, and it's got a body there, and it looks like its arms are folded on its belly, and there's the legs there. The Sleeping Giant, or Unfar Morv in Gaelic, which means the dead man. But yeah, that's Dingle. This is the Great Blasket Island near Dingle in County Kerry in Ireland. So there you go. Nice one. Thanks for hopping on the stream, guys. Much appreciated. It was a nice surprise to get a raid. Sure, I'll start. I'll thanks. I'll have a look. I'll start following all you guys on Instagram as well. If you've followed me, and jump on your streams sometime. But yeah, take care, and I'll see you again soon, hopefully. And how do I turn this off? Oh yeah, end stream. All right, bye.